What we're trying to do is say what we have right now is a house of cards. And we're trying to bring a solid foundation to it so we have a strong emerging Michigan going forward. And we think that we're achieving that. Just by funding our post-retirement health care liability, making the minimum payments, we dropped that liability by over $5 billion. Okay, that's real money. That's not million, that's billion. So it's a significant amount of money. How does it affect the state budget? When Governor Snyder took over, we started with about $1.5 billion structural deficit, meaning that our ongoing revenues were about $1.5 billion less than our ongoing expenditures. How many of you see this as a problem? How long could you operate your business that way? Okay, not very long. But we needed to make sure for the last decade when I came in, when I first started, my staff told me, this isn't anything new. We've had this for about 10 years. We've just been doing one-time fixes to kind of balance the budget each year. Well, Governor Snyder said we're not doing that anymore. We're bringing the budget into structural balance. And to attack this, we actually came up with a pretty comprehensive plan. The first goal was to reduce spending to make sure it was in equilibrium, and I'll talk about that in a minute. We wanted a fair, simple, and efficient tax system, and I'll talk about the importance of that in a minute. And I always add the words predictable and stable, because if you have unpredictability, people aren't going to be willing to invest in the state, and hence it's going to have an impact on economic development. And then Governor Snyder said, we're going to make sure we're accountable to the taxpayer, and we're going to be transparent about what we're doing. Two big initiatives that he's got me working on as the head of the Value for Money government grouping. Structural balance. How many of you understand structural balance? Isn't balance balance? The way I explain this is, if you go out and buy a house, and you take out a mortgage on that house, what do you have to do to qualify for that house? You need to show that you have the monthly recurring income to be able to make the payment. Right? They may look at how much money you have in your savings account, but it's going to be more interesting to them what their monthly recurring amount is, because you don't want to be paying your mortgage out of your savings account. Okay, so you want to make sure that your ongoing income matches your ongoing expenditures. And that's not how it had been here in the state, as I just got through talking about. So we really wanted to bring that into structural balance. We reduced about $1.5 billion in spending. As part of the budget process, we wanted to eliminate all one-time solutions. Okay, our budget as it sits today doesn't have any one-time money in it. Why is this important? It's important because when I go into Governor Snyder here in a couple of months to start putting together the 2013 budget, I'm not going in saying, oh, Governor, we have all of these growth pressures, plus we have $1.5 billion hole to fill. Now I'm going in saying, Governor, this is our available revenue growth. These are our ongoing budget pressures. Where are your priorities? Where do you want to apply this money to? See what I'm saying? So it was important for us to right-size the budget. We wanted to bring all the tax expenditures into the budget process. There was this thought that because it was a tax expenditure, meaning it was a tax credit or something off of the top, that we didn't have to pay for it. Well, what happens is the revenue adjusters will take that, they'll reduce the amount, and then give us the numbers, right? Because it's less revenue coming into the state. And so what we really wanted to do was just make sure that we were operating in a transparent way. Because in government, on the tax side, what you do is you create uncapped liabilities. And it was important for Governor Snyder to say, no, we want to be able to say how much we want to invest in a particular activity. We did that with the film credit. I know there were a lot of people that were concerned and frustrated with the film credit. I've made several good friends in the film credit industry. Seriously, I've been up there, met with them several times. But what we had in this state was a 42% uncapped liability. Meaning if Disney or somebody were to come in and film a $100 million film, we wouldn't give them 42% against the taxes they paid. We would give them $42 million of that $100 million spent. Well, that's great. And again, I'm not commenting on film policy or anything else. But it was a situation where if the film office went out and incentivized $1 billion worth of films, everybody would be saying what a success it was, where I'd be trying to find $400 million to cut out of the budget so I could make that payment. And so we wanted to bring that into the budget process and say, sure, we like that activity, but we want to limit it and decide how much money we want to spend in that activity. So that was important to us. And we wanted to right-size all of the government programs. We're still working on optimizing the internal engine of state government, but we did reduce spending in a lot of areas there. Tax reform. How many of you are aware that we did something on the tax side? You've heard that? We got a few headlines on that one. Why is it important? Governor Snyder ran on repealing the Michigan business tax. Okay, one of the things that we found is that this was a very unstable tax. As I've talked to business owners, I'm sure many of you could tell me that you really couldn't figure out how much taxes you owed until the end of the year when your CPA figured it out and brought you the bill. It was a very comprehensive tax that was, as the governor's labeled it, a job-killing tax. Well, he ran on repealing that. And we're in a new Michigan. The importance of doing that is we're in a new Michigan now. And we need to look at the revenue streams coming in, our expense side of the ledger, and match them up and make sure that they match going forward. When you look at the business taxes, we wanted an opportunity where they knew what they were going to pay, and it was a stable environment. And that was one of the reasons why we had to get the budget into balance, because we get our money from the taxpayers, all of you and our businesses. And as long as we're running $1.5 billion structural deficit, it's telling the business community and the individual community, the individual taxpayer community, we may come after you at any time to raise taxes to balance our budget. So we wanted to make sure that we were in equilibrium there. We passed the new business tax, the corporate income tax, 6% tax. People understand it. It's a stable tax. They know what to expect. On the personal side, we wanted to create a plan where those who were benefiting from state services were contributing to state services. In the last decade, Michigan, as you know, is the only state in the country to lose population. But can anybody tell me where we actually grew in population? It was in our senior demographic. Okay? Well, when we're not taxing pensions as a state, in essence what we're doing as people are retiring is we're moving people off of the tax rolls. Now, we love our elderly. We love our retired population. They spend a lot of money. They're great to have here in Michigan. But what was happening is we had a long-term structural problem, in that we were moving people off of the tax rolls, thus shouldering a bigger burden on our demographic that was shrinking, the working demographic, those who were still employed. And so it was an issue that if we didn't address now, it would have to be addressed down the road, when I would say the consequences would be much higher. Now, based upon what we did in the ultimate bill that was passed, we realize that we're still top 10 in the way we treat senior income nationally, so we're still a very senior citizen-friendly state. But it was one of those things that we had to do to make sure that we had a solid foundation to build on going forward, because otherwise you have a lot of structural inefficiencies in the system, and we have a problem. And so these are some of the reforms that we did. Accountability and transparency. We have open Michigan.gov, and on this site, the governor has wanted to challenge us to put out dashboards and scorecards and performance metric type data and information. The first thing he did in his State of the State is he got up and held a dashboard up, basically the health of Michigan. Now, a lot of people told him not to do that, but he said, no, we want to be measured, we want to be accountable to the public. And so this is what we've done. We've created this website. You can go to it. We're working on spending information, putting the information out there to the public, because we work for you. Okay, government exists because of the public paying taxes. And so it's all about being accountable and transparent to the public. We have external dashboards. Just yesterday, the governor delivered his infrastructure message. A very critical area. I know that over the last 10 years, Michigan's had very difficult financial times, and our infrastructure suffered. Not only our physical infrastructure, but our IT infrastructure and a lot of the different assets that we have as a state. And we need to start paying attention to those to make sure that they're there going into the future. But he put out a dashboard, a physical infrastructure dashboard yesterday. He did the same thing when he had his health and wellness message. And he did, on the different special messages that he's done. And these are dashboards the public can go into this website and look at and see how we're doing. They change as we get new data. Internally, we have scorecards that all of our agencies have now that will tell you in a quick look how they're performing. How are they meeting the needs of Michiganders? How are we serving the people that we need to serve and doing it in a cost-effective way that benefits them long term? And so we're proud of this stuff. We think that that's important for us going forward in reinventing Michigan. Now, we have, and I'll talk a little bit about this, because government doesn't have all the solutions. We don't have all the answers. We're trying to do the best we can, but we really need to get smart about what we're doing. We need to come up with new and innovative ideas. We can't afford to operate the same government that we have for years. Not just in Michigan. The federal government can't do it. The local governments can't do it. We need to get smarter. We need to talk about sharing services. Just this week, I had the opportunity to work with IT as part of my responsibilities. Just this week, we had CIOs from about 7 or 8 of our surrounding states join us in Detroit for a discussion on how we can better collaborate across state lines. We're not just talking about doing an internal to state government. We're talking about how can we partner on some of these key issues that we need to invest in and develop going forward across state lines. We need to do it with the federal government. We're doing it with the local government. We're having local governments come in and participate in the state's network so we don't have to duplicate all these costs, because you all are just single taxpayers. The taxpayer shouldn't really worry whether it's a state tax or a local tax or a federal tax. Government should be working on the back end to make sure that we're streamlining it to best meet the taxpayer's needs. And we're starting to have that dialogue here in Michigan.